Hi everybody. Yeah. Hi. Um, this week is a free week. And last week, which I missed, was about transphobia in the LGB plus community or the queer community. I'm I couldn't make a video last week. Couldn't make a video last week, which I was kind of sad about because I I don't know. I actually had something I really knew I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about what, like, a specific response I see to transphobia within the LGB plus community. So, I'm, wow, I'm really tired. So, we have the acronym LGBT, or, LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, etc., etc. Things that, something that has been questioned by people in the community and out of the community is why why do we group these identities together in an acronym? And a lot of times people focus on how you know LGB and just most of the letters in the acronym are about sexuality, whereas T, transgender, is about gender. So it's like, why are we grouping in, like, it's not the same thing. Like, gender and sexuality are absolutely not the same thing, so why are we putting them, together? Like, why are we grouping them together? And I think the answer is that even though they're not the same thing, a lot of people, a lot of homophobic, transphobic people, or people who are just ignorant, think that they are the same thing. And there are very similar responses to people with, like, people who aren't straight and people who aren't cis. And they're all related because it all has to do with our it all has to do with gender. So, like, as far as sexuality, it's it's as far as sexuality, like, the thing that bothers homophobic people about gay people is that they are attracted to, or they love, the gender that they should not be attracted to or loving. So, and then they're basically not acting, like, according to, homophobes, they're not acting the way that someone of their gender should be acting as far as, romantic and sexual relationships. I don't know if that right now, like, if that was a clear enough explanation. I don't want to, I guess, go into the details of it because that's not really what I want to talk about. But there was actually an essay I ended up reading in my philosophy class last semester, by, what's her name? She is a famous writer, and she wrote she wrote this book on, was it just gender in general or transgender people? She is a transgender woman. What's her name? It's uh and the essay was basically, oh, yeah, okay. Okay, the writer I'm talking about is Julia Serrano. She wrote Whipping Girl, a transsexual woman on sexism and the scapegoating of femininity. Which I was pretty happy that we ended up reading one of her essays in class. But anyway, so the essay was basically, she coined a term, oppositional sexism, which basically explains, it's like, a specific sort of, I mean, it's called sexism, but it's not really sexism the way we use sexism. It's like, overlapping sexism, homophobia, and transphobia, and basically she explains in the essay that she coins that term, the where she coins that term, she she explains why, why society has grouped all those things together, and how to sort of, how, like, what they all have in common, which makes, people who have prejudice against us for sexuality or and slash or for gender. Yeah. If you want to read the essay, it's in the book Whipping Girl. But where was I? Oh yeah, the acronym. So, that's this, the similarities in how we are perceived is what, brings trans people and cis queer people together in some sort of the same group. But then obviously, if cis queer people are going to, if cis queer people, if words, if cis queer people are going to, reject us, be transphobic, that's not very community minded, to be very mild about it. So then the question is, like, what do we as trans people do about it? So obviously there's one, obvious conclusion is that we just respond in the same way that we do, we respond to that transphobia the same way we do from transphobia from cis straight people. But I mean, cis straight people don't end up being in, don't generally end up being in the same community that we go to for support, regarding our gender identity and being transgender. Whereas, if someone is looking for help, for a support group, to talk about, to get help, to know that we are with other trans people, a lot of those groups aren't just trans only groups, they're LGBT groups, they're queer groups, and whatever, like, for different groups there might be a very, like, there might be a, each group has an individual reason why whoever started the group, the organizers, want to have it for all LGBT people instead of having, I don't know, a specific group for trans people. But a lot of the times, like, excuse me, I mean, from what I've seen, it seems like it's hard enough to get the funding, the organization, and just the outreach for a group that is for anyone who identifies for anyone who identifies as LGBT plus. So, like, that's hard enough, and it's hard enough for those groups to both, get off the ground, get enough members, and then actually succeed and do well in the long term. So if you try to just have like a group that's just of trans people, the thing, like, geography and just the way that transphobia in society isolates trans people works against the purpose of those trans groups, especially if you're living, if you're not living in a big city, then it can be hard to find a trans group in the first place. But if you find one, then it's probably not going to be, just, meeting just around the corner. Like, especially if you're younger, being able to go to these groups without your, possibly transphobic family, friends, coworkers finding out, and being able to go to these groups, and being able to, I guess, be open and feel safe enough to be open, is hard. And the chances of that, plus the chances of there being a group such in the first place, sort of compound on each other, and they make the possibility smaller. And then if you add into that other dangerous prejudices and systems of oppression that may be put into effect by people in that very group that you're going to for help, then that just lowers the possibility of someone finding, a good, safe place where they can go and be open about their identity. I mean, it's hard enough to go and be open with a bunch of, strangers or people you don't know very well yet, and and then be open about your trans identity. But then if you're doing that with the risk or the threat of harassment or violence based on other parts of your identity, if I mean, it's hard enough to deal with those identities at the same time. But when you're out to someone, and you're, the way a lot of people see it, I figure, is that just by being at those groups, you're sort of outing yourself. Even though, like, so, I mean, technically, no one's gonna, I don't know, check to see if you're trans if you're going to these groups. People will just assume that you are, because the group is for trans people. So, I mean, it's never really happened to me, but I imagine that going to a group like that in search of support, and then and then witnessing or receiving, racism from the people who are supposed to help. They're supposed to be like me. It's supposed to be community. It's got to be really more, more hurtful, more devastating than it usually is. And that's, so that can happen in any group, which is, you know, and I mean, that's the sort of thing that makes makes it, often more hurtful, more damaging to receive transphobia from cis queer people, because it's often from coming from someone who is in our, like, supposed to be safe place in our community. Especially if you're actively going out and trying to, join your community, then it's really damaging and scary to receive that from the people who are sitting next to you, you know, metaphorically and possibly literally. So what do we do about that specifically? What do we do about the abundance of transphobia coming from cis people who are also our fellow queer people? I've heard and read and seen people talking about this. Some people say, oh, we should separate ourselves. Like, we don't, like, people say, maybe they might say, you know, the T in LGBT doesn't really fit in anyway. It's about gender, not sexuality. It's not the same thing. So we don't even need them. It's clear that, being queer while still being cis doesn't actually change your, chances of being transphobic. So we should just separate. Yeah, I don't know what I would say about whether or not it changes your chances. I figure that would be an interesting study, but I don't really know how exactly you could do any sort of study, because, you know people can be really subtle about their transphobia. But I think I'm going on a tangent right now. What was I saying? Wow, I've talked for a long time. Anyway, yeah, so some trans people suggest that, separation, like, we should go our separate ways because they're only hurting us. And I guess I can kind of see where they're coming from, especially considering the history of queer liberation in the United States within the last 100 years. There's a lot of instances of trans activists being, being silenced and pushed down by cis queer activists, and then using the progress they made, or, you know, the even, like, the words and the rhetoric that they used to advance their own ideals while still contributing to the oppression of transgender people. So, like, with that sort of history, I would really understand why people would have that view. But I'm not completely sure that it is actually what would be best for trans people, at least in places where there is a history of, like, an LGBT community, as in a community where the people with alternate sexualities and alternate genders work together and are grouped together on that basis. I think that the the history and the past of all of the of the movements and resources that have been offered, I guess offered to all sorts of queer people. I think that that's very useful, and if we were to stop that, if that were to stop, there would be a lot of, I think that there would be a lot of, you know, people who would not would not get a lot of you know, community and community resources that they would get otherwise. So if a, you know, if a trans kid is, you know, trying to find resources, trying to find a community, trying to find people who can who can teach them more and who can accept them and their gender identity, but and they find these things, but they don't have the sort of they don't have any sort of access or knowledge about resources for LGB plus people. Then there might be some of those resources, whether they are straight or queer in their sexuality. There might be some resources that really could help them, and vice versa. But I'm not as concerned about vice versa, because, I mean, if someone is cis and queer, and they have access to resources and community centered around their queer sexuality, but they don't have that about they don't have access or as much access and knowledge about trans gender identities. There probably is a lot of stuff that, like, about, like, a lot of resource and communities and stuff like that focused on trans people, but, like, could still help cis queer people, but it would not in any way be necessary. Whereas a trans person, if a trans person was, you know, separated from the knowledge and the community that was based on anything other than their transgender identity, you know, there's a good chance that they themselves are you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, etc. And therefore they would need those resources too. And it's possible that they're straight and they don't need those resources, and but it could help them anyway. But I guess my main concern would be the people who are trans and not straight and don't have, like, you know, there are enough obstacles in our way. It's hard enough. Like, I really support all, like, you know, we already have, I think that as far as resources and community go, we already have too much separation already, and transphobia is part of that separation and is a major cause. Probably, like, honestly, I can't think of any other cause. It is the reason why there is so much separation, because there are so many cis queers who are transphobic, and that contributes to the you know, people devaluing our lives as trans people, and therefore devaluing our struggles. So I guess I see both ways, and you know, both, like, what, you know, as a solution to the way that transphobia within the queer community is, like, it's a unique sort of damage. So, what do you guys think? Like, do you guys think, and like, what have you heard about people, saying, oh, we as trans people should sort of separate ourselves from cis queers because they're transphobic, and they're, us being part of one big community is not really helping us, or people who are in favor of the, I guess, people joining again, joining under the acronym LGBT plus or any other acronym, and being one big happy queer community. uh that's a impossible thing if I ever heard one, but yeah. So what do you guys think? And I don't know, sorry for this being late, but one day late is better than 1 week late, which I guess it is also sort of 1 week late because I'm doing last week's topic, but whatever. Oh, okay, yeah. So, I'm sure you guys have noticed, but we have a new member. If you haven't watched his video yet, watch Cruz's video, and please welcome him to the channel. And so now we have a member for each day of the week, which is good. It's our original goal. We are still accepting applications because we want to have some extra members for weekend days, and also to help, if someone can't do videos for a while, or someone keeps missing them, like me, because I'm an idiot, then that can help. So check out our Tumblr. We're gonna be changing some things, the organization and layout on our Tumblr. So check that out for the application, and more info about what we're looking for, and why we are why did I say hiring? Why we're accepting extra members. And I hope you guys are having a good day. Bye.